Hey, everybody, it's me, Tuniscia. Oh, and welcome to Tea with Tuniscia. Oh, where I'm a transformational coach, keynote speaker, and corporate trainer supporting you with building wealth through forgiveness. And today, we're going to talk about forgiving those people who overstep our boundaries. You know those boundary oversteppers, the continuous people. Hey, Christopher, the people who continuously, hey, Yogita, I hope I said that right, continuously overstep our boundaries. And it's annoying. And sometimes we haven't always put them in place. So maybe they don't know they're overstepping their boundaries with us, but we just feel awkward. So let's talk about what we can do to forgive those people who always overstep our boundaries. They're like serial boundary oversteppers. Might be the people who like to text us at midnight and expect us to respond immediately. They might be the people who expect us to jump up and stop doing everything we're doing in order to meet their every single need. Might be our family members who always like to input what their opinion is about how we should raise our children. We have those family members and friends who are always there to give us their unsolicited opinion about something. So what do? One, the first thing is acknowledge your feelings. A lot of times when people are sharing or overstepping their boundaries, they might be really good at sharing or telling us why they're right. But the reality is your body and your mind was created to protect you. And so you know when you're upset and you know why you're upset. So acknowledge your feelings. Hey, LJ, acknowledge your feelings. Okay, that's the first step. A lot of times we don't know why we're really upset, but we just know something inside of us isn't setting very correctly. And so we're like just pissed. And then it goes into this defensive mode, but really we need to acknowledge, why are we upset? And even if there is a level of truth to whatever it is they're saying, that's for you to work through and figure out. Because when other people try to tell us about ourselves, it doesn't always come out the way we need it to through us. We don't change because somebody tells us to. We change or shift when we decide to do that. So one, take a deep breath and just acknowledge your feelings. Why are you so offended or upset about them overstepping your boundaries? And whatever your reason is, it's okay. Okay, I want you to know these are your boundaries. And let me just tell you something. Hi, Brenda. The one thing that we always forget is, boundaries are set for us. A lot of times we think that boundaries are for other people. So I've set a lot of boundaries in my life, and I can't expect anybody else to acknowledge or even take proper action when it comes to my boundaries. However, it is my responsibility to ensure that my boundaries are protected. They don't have to adhere to my boundaries, but I get to always make sure, you've overstepped. No. Whether they accept it or receive it or not, that's not my business. But we're going to get down to that part later. So one, acknowledge your feelings. Why are you upset about them overstepping your boundaries? The next one is recognize how your boundaries have been crossed. You know those times when you're really upset with somebody, you can't figure out why you're upset, but you are annoyed. And then somebody may say, why are you upset? And you're like, I don't know. You know why we say I don't know? Because we have been trained that we are supposed to stuff our feelings and emotions down. Hey, Gailey, we're supposed to stuff our feelings and emotions down in order to make sure everybody else is comfortable and happy. That's not how this works. In order to ensure that our boundaries are not continuously overstepped, we got to always sit up tall, speak up, and we have to know, what are we feeling? Why are we annoyed? What happened that is causing that? So recognize how the boundaries have been crossed. Them calling late at night and you've asked them not to, is that it? Them borrowing money from you all the time and never paying you back? The family member who's always has an opinion and then they want to tell you, well, I'm the grandma or I'm the so-and-so. Doesn't matter. If you feel like your boundaries have been overstepped, that's something to acknowledge, but you have to really dig into that. And to that vein, I will say this, if you're in a place where you're just being stubborn, then you want to dig into that a little bit. Like, why am I being so stubborn? Why does this thing matter so much to me? But you still want to set your boundaries. And I'm not saying just F everybody. I'm just saying set your boundaries, but be clear on why they are, because too often we dismiss our boundaries in order to make everybody else happy. So the next one, first one is acknowledge our feelings. The next one, recognize how our boundaries have been crossed. And next one is realize and or accept how you need to set your boundaries. How do they need to be set? This is something huge, especially if you're co-parenting. What are the boundaries? You don't get to text me all night long and I respond. What are the boundaries in your relationships? What are the boundaries when it comes to work? How do your colleagues talk to you? Do you allow them to be rude to you? Do they ask you every day to buy you lunch or go get the lunch, and that's not part of your job description and you do it just because you feel obligated, but every single day you're pissed and annoyed because you feel like the gopher? These are all the things where it's super important for us to set up and be very clear about what our boundaries are. And nobody can tell you you're being petty or it's not that serious or it's not that important. We have to know what we need to do in order to protect ourselves. And the only way we can begin to forgive other people is, first of all, to realize what boundaries have been overstepped and also acknowledge whether or not we have been consistent in ensuring that our boundaries are met and kept, because we are the gatekeepers for our boundaries. We are, not someone else. We are. So are you consistently keeping things that way? What does that mean? If someone speaks to me in a tone that I don't like or I don't approve, I will let them know you don't have my permission to speak to me in that tone. So I'm not acknowledging what you're saying. And that's something I would say to my children as well. Whoever it is, you don't have my permission to be rude to me. So I'm not acknowledging what you're saying. If you say that, now you've ended that conversation because you don't need to respond to it. So now we have acknowledge your feelings, how we're going to forgive people for overstepping their boundaries. 1, acknowledge your feelings. 2, recognize how your boundaries have been crossed. 3, recognize and accept how you need to set your boundaries. And here's the next one that I love so much. Become centered and grounded in it. You know, a lot of times when we're doing things that we've been trained to do, which is make sure everybody else is happy and not so much worry about our own feelings, we take on all of this stuff and it causes this anxiety. But when you become centered and grounded, what that means is that you know that backlash may come. You know that people may try to be manipulative to get you to do what they want you to do. You know that they're going to come back and remind you about all the things that they've done for you. You know that that's going to come, but you don't fall into that. What you're going to do is you're going to still listen to your emotions. Be present with yourself, be present with your body, and then really dig into, why do I always want to make sure everyone else is pleased and I keep putting myself on the back burner? And we wonder why we're not living our best life. We wonder why we don't have the job we want. We wonder why we're not running the business that we desire. We wonder why our family life isn't the way we want it. It's because everybody else's voice is louder than your own, and you have everybody else in the driver's seat of your life. So it's, hi, Melissa. So it's time to stop and be sure to take the driver's seat back, okay? Take that driver's seat back. So what are you going to do? You're going to breathe. When people are doing things, it's easy for us to just lash out and say something. But I'm going to tell you what, it takes far more restraint to sometimes be quiet in the midst of nonsense than it is to just spew out nastiness, right? So the stronger person is the person who is capable of just being quiet for a moment. It does something eerie. If you're a person who likes to lash out first and think about it second and then feel guilty for what you said, try it the other way. It's going to be really uncomfortable. You might be biting your tongue really hard, but do it. Just try to quiet yourself out. Breathe, meditate, and listen to your body. Listen to the emotions, because your emotions are valid. When you feel like you've been violated for whatever the reason, and there are people who are not being accountable. So I'm going to say this one little thing. If you're somebody who just doesn't like taking accountability for your actions or your activity, I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying don't take accountability. Be accountable for your actions. Absolutely. That's how we're going to grow. So be accountable. But at the same time, if you feel like your boundaries have been overstepped, then you validate that. And I'm not saying don't listen. If somebody is saying, hey, I'm just saying you're not being accountable, just listen to them. Hear them. Try to listen from a different perspective. But that's another talk that we can have for another day. So we're going to run over these one more time before I give you the final one. Acknowledge your feelings when we are working through forgiving people for overstepping their boundaries. Acknowledge your feelings. Recognize how your boundaries have been crossed. Realize and accept how you need to set boundaries, and be centered and grounded. The backlash will come when you do these things, when you set your boundaries, and then you feel guilty. Isn't that the worst? Like, you are doing what you know you're supposed to do. The backlash comes, and then you feel guilty because you're like, maybe I shouldn't have said it. Yes, you should have. Yes, you should stand up for yourself. If these were your children and someone was treating them that way, what advice would you give them? If this was one of your loved ones and they came to you with the exact same story, what advice would you be giving them? Don't feel guilty for allowing yourself to feel present in the moment. Don't feel guilty for requiring people to treat you the way you desire to be treated. You deserve it. You deserve to be treated like the beautiful human being that you are. You are perfectly imperfect. Maybe the past you did all kinds of things, but today, let's work through that. And it doesn't mean that you don't get to set boundaries just because whatever happened in the past is hanging over your head. Release that thing so that you can move forward, okay? So our last one is voice it. Listen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to voice what we feel. If we've set boundaries, so often when I'm talking to people, I'm like, well, did you tell them you feel that way? Well, they should know. Did you tell them you feel that way? Well, kinda. No. Did you specifically outline moving forward? If you text my telephone at 11 o'clock at night, I will not respond until the next day. If you ask to borrow money, we are going to be signing a promissory note or something of that sort. If you ask to borrow money, you must have already paid me back the money that you've borrowed. If it's somebody who's overly in your business when it comes to family, listen, I have not asked or nor solicited your opinion on this particular thing. Thank you for your advice, but you're overstepping your boundaries. Or if you have asked them or solicited their opinion on a particular thing, you can say, thank you. You've shared that with me in the past. Now I'm going to work through this myself. So the key to us forgiving people who overstep our boundaries is to really completely take 100% accountability for us. Have we been clear? Have we made sure our voices are heard? And have we held our standard of whatever it is that we want people to adhere to on a consistent basis? Because so often, so often we do not consistently require that people stay within the boundaries that we set. Remember, these are our boundaries. They're not their boundaries. They may be habitual boundary oversteppers, right? But it's our responsibility to say, hey, we're not doing that today or ever at all. So here we go. I'm going to go through these one more time. Take a moment, jot them down. If you have people who are overstepping boundaries, I'm holding you accountable. We're accountable to make sure that people stay in the pocket that we need them to be in. We're not controlling them. We're not dictating their life. We're not doing any of that. We are just working within the boundaries of our space. Okay. Remember, this is our space. We get to talk about, feel, and live the life within our space that we desire. And people get to decide if they're willing to do that within that confining whatever demographics of whatever it is or not. It's okay. It's their choice. But we're going to go through it again. Forgiving people who overstep boundaries. 1, acknowledge your feelings. 2, recognize how your boundaries have been crossed. We have to know that. 3, realize and accept how you need to set boundaries in your life. 4, be centered and grounded. When the backlash comes or the guilt comes, you want to breathe, meditate, listen to your body, and your emotions are always valid. I want you to remember that you matter. And lastly, voice it. Be very clear when you are setting your intention for whatever your boundaries are. And even when those boundaries are between yourself, when you're saying you're not smoking anymore or whatever those things are, be clear on what your boundaries are. Set the intentions the exact way you want them. For my family to yours, you guys know I love you. And I will be back tomorrow. We'll be talking about another forgiveness topic. So listen, if you're on here now, tag me. Let me know what other forgiveness topics we should talk about. I'll talk to you guys soon. I love you guys. Ciao.